And this is a slide I think most people ask me about. So, we've sold a number of spirit brands. The last spirits brand we sold was Penelope Bourbon, the MGP ingredients. And people ask, well, how big do I need to be? And what's my multiple? And like, what KPIs do I need to be hitting? And we presented this slide at Discus and it was well received. So the left-hand side is like, okay, I can't give you a precise number, and it differs by tequila versus whiskey versus gin versus vodka. But strategic buyers want to buy brands that have reached scale. They'll tell you if they plug a small brand into their national distribution system, it's actually bad for the brand. And they don't know how to manage small brands. So there is a threshold of scale. So, if your plan is not to own this forever as a family company, but your plan is to ultimately sell your brand, you have to do certain things to get to scale. And these things on the left are really sort of like entry stakes. You have to have excellent liquid. If you don't have a good tasting liquid, it's table stakes. Authenticity, you can't manufacture it. It could be about a founder. It could be about terroir. It could be about a tasting room. Occasionally it's about a celebrity, but I think the jury is really out on the duration of these celebrity brands. I think a lot of them lack authenticity and the consumer can smell that out. But if you have authenticity, that will feed right into fostering consumer engagement. You've talked about team. You need a great team. Reward your team. Put some type of equity or option plan in for your team. This is going to feed into the metrics to sell, but you have to always be focused on your core. You cannot take your eye off the ball and try to just grow by distribution gains and lose velocity in your core market. If you start to show velocity declines in your core market, that's going to be a red flag. I've seen companies do it on a very low overhead level, but at some point you do have to invest in SG&A and infrastructure. I think these guys have talked about capital raising. I won't really revisit that. You will need to raise capital, but you just are going to have to do it, and you're going to have a reasonable plan to get to profitability. Capturing wholesaler mind share, really difficult. The industry is so consolidated with Southern Breakthrough and RNDC. This is frankly, the biggest concern I've heard from small brands is getting the attention of wholesalers. Let me flip over to the exit. So I want to make sure that our last speaker has time. So this is what I think people really focus on and care about. What do the buyers want to see in a brand that makes it appealing for an exit? So first, your core markets have to be strong and growing, and that's usually measured by velocity. Second, you do have to show that the brand can travel, and by traveling, you have to open up new markets. However, I would caution you to be judicious at the rate you open new markets, because I think one thing a lot of young companies do is they cover up declines in their core markets with distribution gains. And the first thing a buyer is going to do, he's going to figure out that you're weak in your core and you're opening markets too fast. And there's a third tension at play, which you have to leave enough white space for the buyer. So there are three tensions you need to manage: keeping your core strong, opening up new markets at a deliberate pace, but not so fast that you muck up your white space, particularly if it's in franchise states like Georgia and Virginia and North Carolina, where it might be difficult to realign your brand with a buyer. Gross margin, this is remarkably important to every buyer. General metrics, if you are using a contract producer, I'd like to see your gross margins around 50%. If you own your own distillery and you're vertically integrated, I'd like to see your gross margins at least 65%. If you have aged liquid, and this was a challenge in one of our deals, you need to be laying down enough inventory to meet your demand forecast. And a lot of entrepreneurs are like, well, can't you put a multiple in my revenue, and then can't you add the value of my aged inventory on top of that? You can't do that, because that aged inventory is necessary to fuel your demand plan. But if you're light on aged inventory, it will bite you in a sale process. And then price point relative to the existing portfolio. This just means the street, like Diageo owns 5 tequila brands. Bacardi owns 3. They won't just buy one brand. So if you have a price point that fits nicely in a gap, that is an important criteria to a strategic category conviction, and other differentiated qualities. Oh, the last thing, if you don't own your distillery, that does not mean you cannot get a high value for your business. Penelope Bourbon did not own a distillery. They used MGP, and they got an extremely high multiple. But what it does do is it limits your buyer, because if somebody doesn't have onshore domestic distillation capacity, the buyer, then they are not the best buyer if you're if you're using a contract producer. So it limits your buyer set.